Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up. The 20 you have been accused of also interfering with, you say it is not true. How do you then address this allegation that is in a cautioned police statement by a COC?
Well, Mr. Chairman, because the gentleman who was supposed to have made a statement came out to deny it. It was just something somebody put on the social media, and other people speak it across this country. So ECO is on record to have stated categorically that nowhere he did mention that I, John Peter Amewu, took 20 excavators from the 500 or so or 200, whatever number excavators that were seized. Nowhere. So he came out to deny that assertion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, as a reporter, I recalled in 2008 when Ghana experienced doomsday, a number of interventions, including the importation of some gen sets, were deployed to solve the problem of doomsday. It was not to be permanently resolved, and so we had doomsday again under President Mohammed. A number of interventions were taken. Those interventions led to heavy criticisms, such as interventions such as the purchase of the car power, Amewu, and other such interventions. The former president and the NDC were lambasted. Given your experience at the Energy Ministry and the fact, which I know, that car power has become one of the most reliable source of power, and the Amewu deal that had to be renegotiated because of its relevance to the power sector, will you say that some of these criticisms were misplaced?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, yes, of course, it's on record today that one of our dependable source of power from the combined cycle turbine is the car power, which is driving into the grid an equivalent of 450 megawatts, on the daily basis, as of when availability is declared. At the time that the issue of whether car power was needed or not was very high in the agenda, the discussions were mainly on the cost of acquisition of the power plant. And so at that time, the capacity charges were, of course, far in excess of what the opposition at that time thought it might be. And so I would say that the thinking at that time was, of course, misplaced, but it was rather to send a signal about the cost of acquisition. You also remember one of the issues raised at that time strongly was the fact that there would be a need for competition and generation, because most of those emergency plans that were acquired went through the process of negotiation. And the understanding that time was the fact that by negotiation we will not be getting value in terms of the tariff rate for the consumers if I had gone through competition, and the price will come down to the consumers at a very low rate. So it was based on that framework that, on assumption of office, we took in measures to make sure that we renegotiated some of those tariffs. And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to announce to you, as I speak, that car power's rate, for instance, have been renegotiated in terms of the tariff, and an amount quite close to about 25% in terms of what it was has been reduced down from the capacity charges. And of course, this was even the main reason why in our last adjustment of the utility bills by the PRC, we didn't see that upgrade in terms of increase in the tariff because of the capacity that car power, of course, was generating into the grid. So yes, car power is one of our major plans. Yes, of course, the rate at that time was high. And yes, today we've been able to negotiate the rate about 25% less than what it was.
But just a quick follow-up on that also. Won't you say the times have also influenced the rates, given the fact that Ghana was in need at the time that the deal was made. And of course, if you are out of the need, you may have an advantage on the negotiation table.
Yes, of course. At the time the decision was taken, it was taken within a short period, and that is why they were classified as emergency power plants, because they were to come in and address emergency issues, which is good. But that doesn't take the responsibility of looking at what the cost was expected to be. The cost could be looked at it from different perspectives. At that time, we thought that the cost in terms of the capacity charge was a bit higher than expected. So time could have changed, as you rightly put it, because at the time car power was brought in, it was expected to feed, for instance, on heavy fuel in Tema. Today, car power is no longer feeding on heavy fuel. Car power is now feeding on gas, because most of our gas is stranded, in the western side, when there's a stranded gas, and it's of course cheaper than heavy fuel. So car power now has been moved, for instance, to the western side. So yes, circumstances, of course, have changed, and today car power is in quite a comfortable position.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the reduced charges may just be as a result of the fact that we are no longer in an emergency situation, and again, because it's no longer using heavy fuel, which is more expensive than the gas that it uses. But I'll move on to my next question. Article 47 of the Constitution, 1992 Constitution, says 47.1, Ghana shall be divided into as many constituencies for the purpose of election of members of Parliament as the Electoral Commission may prescribe, and each constituency shall be represented by one member of Parliament. You represent the Hohoi constituency. However, there are people in that part of Ghana without a representation in Parliament. I refer here to SAL. I'm sure you are aware of those concerns that have been raised by the people of SAL. Some have attributed their state to possible gerrymandering that may have taken place before the elections. Did you in any way influence the state of affairs that denied them a representation as we speak? If yes, how? And if no, how do you feel about their situation though?
Honourable Member, is any part of that matter pending? Is any part of that matter pending in court? Are you aware that any part of the matter related?
Yes, I'm aware that some part of that matter is in court. Yes, some part of it.
Okay, so Honourable, let me guide you. 93, is that right?
Yeah, order 93.
Order 93. Reference shall not be made on to any matter on which judicial decision is pending in such a way as may, in the opinion of the Speaker, prejudice the interest to the parties. So I'll be watching what answer you give. If in any way I think you prejudice the parties, I will curtail it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I sympathize with my brothers and sisters from the South for not taking the parliamentary voting process. Of course, I have brothers and sisters from there. Mr. Chairman, I went into this race as a player, but not as a referee. I do not constitute the rules that were in place for me to come and contest. I just went in as a contestant. And unfortunately, for one reason, they were not allowed to vote in Hohoi. Mr. Chairman, that's beyond me, but I sympathize with them. And of course, I would have been very happy if the people of South voted, because in 2004 and 2008, those were my strong areas when I contested as a candidate. And so if they had voted, I strongly believe that even the margin made in Hohoi would quite be high. I sympathize with them. I only pray that the agencies that be taking measures are quickly to address the problem to enable them to take part in their voting processes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, the honorable one.
Thank you, Minister. Congratulations. Minister, the Court of Appeal on Monday, 22nd, gave a ruling in a matter of consolidated civil motion between Springfield and then, let me shorten it for you, Springfield Energy, Springfield Exploration and Production Limited versus ENI and Vitol Upstream. This issue arose in court as a result of a letter dated the 9th of April 2020, which you directed the parties to go into what you term unitization of the oil fields that they were exploring, hydrocarbons. And this letter that you wrote was subsequently suspended by another letter dated the 29th July 2020, signed by your Chief Director for and on behalf of the Minister. Can you allay the fears of Ghanaians of any possible legal issues that may take us to the Court of Arbitration? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, yes, of course, I authorized the unitization of the ENI and the Springfield block. Mr. Chairman, unitization is a common process within the industry where in the estimations and technical report evaluation indicated that there is a possible communication or movement of petroleum in situ between two blocks. And for the purpose of maximum and efficient extraction, it's important that the two blocks come together and exploit the resources in a common way so as not to lose the reservoir pressure when two people are working within the same block. So it is on that mandate and that framework of our legislative drive that I issued the letter. The letter, Mr. Chairman, is issued in accordance with the technical report that I have here, which I can also send it in between ENI and the parties. Yes, of course, it's on record that...
Chairman, Mr. Nominee, technical report from where?
From GFCC.
Thank
technical
you.
report.
So say so.
An independent technical evaluation.
And then, Chairman, follow up, ENI and Springfield, are they all Ghanaian entities? Just a small follow-up.
Mr. Chairman, Springfield is a solely Ghanaian entity. The first...
And ENI?
ENI, it's not... Of course, the company is incorporated in Ghana.
So, Chairman, for the purpose of our record, describe the blocks that you are seeking this, the technical term, unitization, yes. So just give us the details for the purpose of our record. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, it's a channel and hydrocarbon accumulation across WCTP Block 2 and OCTP block. So these are the two blocks in contention for the call for the Minister for Unitization.
Did you authorize the letter the Chief Director signed of 29th July 2020? Were you in the know of it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
You were in the process of giving an explanation to the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, this process is a common process, and it was based on this technical report from GMPC that we issued that directive for ENI to comply. Mr. Chairman, ENI was not satisfied with the directive, and we held a number of meetings. Mr. Chairman, we put in place a three-member technical committee to evaluate the data further. Upon further examination of the data, we issue another instruction to the ENI. The other party, which is Springfield, felt that ENI was not promptly complying with the Minister's directive and therefore went to court. Mr. Chairman, as I speak now, I think the case is currently before the Court of Appeal, and I don't think it will be good for me to comment further on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, it's appreciated, but is that to suggest that Springfield were unhappy with your decisions?
Not at all. Springfield was unhappy because ENI refused to comply with the Ministerial directive.
were you not interfering with their contractual mandate that you had so granted them in an earlier agreement?
No, Mr. Chairman, E&I brought out the fact of stabilization clauses, and those were some of the discussions that we held behind closed doors. But stabilization clauses cannot, of course, avoid a call for unitization. A call for unitization is a maximum efficiency of extraction of water.
Just clarify, is Springfield asking for respect, E&I to respect your directive, or they are in court for other purposes which may include judgment debt?
Mr. Chairman, E&I went to court to ask, Springfield went to court to ask E&I to comply with the ministerial directive. That was the case, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Honorable nominee, I have with me the report of the Committee on Roads and Transport on the commercial contract agreement between the government of the Republic of Ghana, represented by the Ministry of Railway Development, Ghana Rail Authority, and Amandi Investment Limited for an amount of 500 million euros for the construction of sections of the Western Railway line on standard gauge from Takoradi Port to Huni Valley. I'm sure you're aware of this arrangement.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of that contract.
This House gave the approval to that request, and it details the scope of work that Amandi is supposed to perform. Can you apprise us on this contract or arrangement between Government of Ghana? Per your brief. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think the contract came to Parliament for ratification. The loan agreement had been also placed before the House. Currently, the contractor, Amandi, is at the stage of mobilization, but the terms, in terms of the financial elements within the loan, have been subjected to further clearing at the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Chairman, as I speak now, E&I is waiting for clearance from the Debt Management Unit and Ministry of Finance, and they will proceed to site to commence construction. That line is very key for us as a country on the Western Line, and Amandi as a contractor is ready to move to site immediately. Clearance in terms of availability of funds for construction have been concluded. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this brings me to my last question, which was sent to me by my constituent called Adobuafu of Abekala Pass Police Post. He wants me to ask you what you are going to do about their salary structure. He works with the Railway Authority, says there are casual workers who are paid 700 Ghana cedis a month, and he feels those within that bracket are not being treated. So I should bring it to your knowledge and ask you what you'll be doing to resolve those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sympathize with your constituents in terms of the size of their salary. Mr. Chairman, productivity must reflect whatever you take home. Unfortunately, the railway industry, as I stated earlier on, is at the verge of collapse, especially the railway company. Normally, most of their internal generated revenues are derived from some of this tariff they got from transportation and haulage of some of our minerals products. Unfortunately, all those facilities currently are not available, even because of the COVID. There's a ban on transportation of passengers. When I Zoom office, we have to speed up the process of completion of most of these rules, where activities will be brought online. When those activities come online, and then we begin to generate revenue, then we can begin to look at their salaries. As it is now, if nothing is being done, of course, there is no way we can just manufacture money from the air and begin to pay them. We must look at what they do. And so we will try to revamp the industry. That's why government is putting attention in revamp of the railway sector. If that is done and done properly, I think that their salaries will commensurate the activities that will emerge from the revamping exercise. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Ajay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable nominee, in Ghana currently, there is an ineffective railway legal and regulatory regime, because as we speak right now, there is no regulation for Railway Act 2008, Act 779. What do you intend doing if you are given the nod?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, regulations are important to drive the law, and they give bare understanding of the framework of the law. And so in every area or sector that we lack regulations, you will see a lot of gaps in terms of implementation. If this House gives me the nod, Mr. Chairman, I would speed up on coming out with the regulation, because the law mandates the minister to do so. I'll come out with the necessary regulation to make sure that the sector becomes very viable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What are two key things that you want to do when you are given the nod? Two key policy decisions that you take to improve the railway sector if you are given them.
Mr. Chairman, one key thing I need to look at quickly when this House gives me the nod is to begin to look at the role of the GRDA, which is the Ghana Railway Development Authority. Currently, the Act spells out their role as the asset owner and as a regulator. It is important, as we all know, that you cannot be a player and at the same time a referee in the same game. If we really expect a future expansion of the industry where the anticipations is for private sector to lead the growth in the future, in the long run, then it's important that we must detach the asset ownership from the regulator. So coming out with an independent regulator to regulate the framework of the railway construction and operation, it's something that I will look at quickly. The other thing that I also have to look at is the intercontinental transportation system through rail, which is of course also very important. For instance, the rail line going from Tema through Mpakadan, to Burkina Faso. Of course, that passes through my constituency, and part of it goes through Honorable Okujoto's constituency also. So those lines, of course, we will concentrate on it and make sure that we drive it down to the northern territory of this country, and make sure that we link the two countries,
Chairman,
together.
northern territory is too broad. Where do you want to extend the railway to? When you say northern territory, I can go from Waya through Bolga, through Hamlin, through Nabrungo, coming towards Sabrugo or Diale. Where are you exactly referring to? Or even Gushegu, if it has to pass through Yendi or Bimbla or Napaile, be specific.
Mr. Chairman, that line terminates at Tamale and then continue from Tamale through Bolkatanga down to Ouagadougou in the northern part.
Chairman, it's appreciated. In your answer to the Honorable Ejari, are we expecting you leading reforms that separate asset ownership from regulation when you become minister? When do you intend to take this initiative if you do become minister? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, this will be taken within my first 6 months in office if the House gives me the nod. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Last, which is a statement. I read this on page 7 of the handing over notes from your ministry. I hope that you will not read the same thing as what you want to do, that JRDA does not want to be a judge in its own course, and that you really meet your 6-month deadline to make sure that it's really separated. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll do so. Thank you.
Yes. Very well.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable nominee, I have 2 questions. The first one borders on a promise you made to the people of Lower Manya when the very unfortunate incident of police brutality and shootout occurred. You recall that you led a team to the community and promised that you were going to investigate the incident and make sure that the perpetrators were brought to book. We had some fatality, people dying, others had their parts amputated, and so on and so forth. What is the state, or what is the status of that investigation, if you have done so?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it's on record that I led a team to the scene and they promised that we would investigate the matter. Mr. Chairman, we put in a committee to begin the investigation at that time. But what happened was that the case went to the police, to look into. So our committee then, therefore, slagged behind in terms of the investigation. And we actually have not completed the investigation. It's on record, we have not completed the investigation because we have relegated that duty to the police when we were told later that the police were on top of the issue.
But being a minister in charge of that sector at the time, are you willing to follow up so you know the status of that investigation, particularly because lives were lost and there are many who were injured and we need to bring that matter to a closure?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'll provide this advice to the new sector minister coming in if he's giving the note. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The second question borders on the light rail transit system. What is the current status of the integrated light rail transit system?
As I stated earlier on, some feasibility works have been done, but no much details, in fact, have been done beyond that light rail system. But that area includes both some of the network within Accra and then Kumasi. So feasibility studies are currently ongoing.
What measures would you put in place to ensure that we achieve this? Because this was part of the 2016 manifesto promise of the MPP, and we would expect that after 4 years it would have been achieved. But since you are now going to that ministry, what kind of assurances can you give the people of Ghana that we are going to see, is going to see the light of day very soon?
Mr. Chairman, if this House gives me the nod, taking into consideration the difficulty we have in terms of our internal transportation system, that would be a key area to look at to speed up, the commencement of that project, because that will also, free our roads, and the traffic density that we witness along our roads, of course, will be reduced. So it's something that I will do very quickly. I'll commence the process. Again, the difficulty, as we all know, has to do with availability of funds. But notwithstanding that, I'll promise the House that it's something I will look on quickly when this House gives me the nod and when I get to the office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Railway construction projects are capital intensive, and many of the figures bandied around are between 500 million, a billion, and upwards. We all know that COVID has also affected the global economy and the Ghanaian economy as well. As you move to the Railways Ministry, if confirmed, how are you going to raise funding to undertake the project of reconstructing our railway sector?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, of course, railway is very capital expensive. A kilometer of railway runs between $6 to $7 million, far in excess of what the road sector currently witness. In the midst of this COVID, global funds, it's very limited. But Mr. Chairman, I'm praying that now that we've got a vaccine, we will begin to see the reductions of the COVID and the world will gradually begins to move in its normal way. We will proceed with looking for funding, no matter the difficulty, because our capital within the country itself, in terms of the resources, are very limited, and therefore it's going to be difficult to rely on government funding of railway projects. So we'll explore other avenues. I appreciate your concern, about the difficulty of global fund. Notwithstanding that, we'll still explore the avenue to see how we can attract that. The second one is, as I think I've stated it earlier, the government must also make efforts to continue to look at the railway sector as a social product, just as we do, for the roads. If we put that attention, which of course I know His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo will do, if you listen carefully to his inaugural address, with the attention that he wants to put on the railway sector, then parallel along external funding and domestic funding, we should be able to speed up most of this construction and put it in a state that Ghanaians will benefit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, as you continue to expand railway infrastructure in this country, can you give this committee an assurance that all new rail construction will be provided with ducts? As you do the excavation, you put pipes alongside it where fiber and even electricity cables can also be laid alongside the tracks to extend that infrastructure to the other parts of the country and prolong the lifespan of the infrastructure we're putting in place. When people are constructing roads, they construct the roads without reference to development. So, few years down the line, other contractors come along the line, dig across the roads to lay pipes. If they provided ducts alongside the roads and the railways infrastructure, it would just be a means of passing those pipes along those channels. So, going forward, are you going to assure this committee that you would mandate that all new construction of railway infrastructure would have pipes laid alongside it to facilitate, would have ducts for fiber and electrical and other cables laid alongside it to prolong the lifespan and make it easier for us to extend these complementary infrastructure to the rest of the country?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, infrastructure development under normal circumstances should not be looked at as a unilateral development. We should consider it complementary, jointly, with other sectors that's, of course, very important. And if you look at how these things are done all over the world, ministries are always in collaboration to know where they fit in terms of the infrastructure development. So I think your suggestion is well noted. Of course, going forward, we should begin to do this jointly, where rail lines will be constructed without putting in the necessary ducts that will mandate, for instance, the communication ministry to do other activities, water to do its activities, electricity service to undertake its activities. So I think this combination in terms of looking at which other sectors fit into the construction to advance, on that proponent, of course, is something that we'll look at. Of course, we are colleagues that are going to sit in cabinet together, and I'm going to consult you from time to time when this project. Sorry if I'm giving the nod, and we'll be sitting together to discuss some of these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, please.
Now, Aka Energy appears to have stoked quite a bit of controversy, and there have been a lot of calls, even this past week, that the contract be renegotiated because some people think that it is not in the interest of the country. Was the Aka Energy contract good for Ghana or not? And or are there aspects of it that can be improved that you'd recommend to your successor in office?
The renegotiation of the Aka contract, I think, was done with good faith. It came to this house, the house gave us the nod, and it was done with an intention that in the long run, Ghana will really benefit. In terms of the legislative aspect of the contract, we have not done anything that is quite different from what the contract states specifically. What the contractor seeks to do is, because of the stabilization clause that were in the contract at the time it was signed, the contractor insists that coming into effect of the new EMP law, we should take him out of the new EMP law and make sure that we include clauses in that contract to make sure that anybody who reads that contract can read outright that this contract is not subjected to the terms and conditions in the new EMP. That was what we did with the ACA contract, and we came to the Parliament here for necessary approval. I think that it was also done with anticipation that while the contractor is still on site doing its development, the mandate also exists for him again to undertake exploratory activities. These are again clauses that we have picked from the new one because it was not in the old one. Where stabilization provisions exist in contract, Mr. Chairman, what it does is that it gives the developer the mandate to do choose and pick, of course, because he would, of course, be eliminated from the new one that is coming in. But when we as a country find out that there is something new that we can impose on him, we will do that. And that is why we mandated the contractor that he can still go ahead to do exploration even though he's doing a development, which we think is good. We did that for the purpose that we can increase our reserve to production ratio. Mr. Chairman, today most of our reserves are drying very fast and new wells are not being replaced. In the oil and gas sector, what is important is to look at your reserve replacement ratio, because these resources are not, they are finite, they are not infinite. And so as you take it, you need to add more. So by doing this, we expect that we'll be adding more reserves to the existing reserve to increase our production. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, how much exactly is the energy sector debt? And how much did the free electricity for COVID extended by government to the citizens cost the exchequer?
The energy sector debt stands at about $1.5 billion US from a figure of about $2.7 billion. I've stated earlier on that the Ministry of Finance has already cleared all the debts it owes ECG. So the debt today is about $1.5 billion through reconciliation, and I think that's a very good effort by this government.
It is continuing coverage of the Ministerial vetting. John Peter Amewu there in Parliament right now being asked a host of questions, including Dumso energy agreements, etc. We need to take a quick break here. We'll be right back and go back. You're welcome back from that short break. We take you back to Parliament. John Peter Amewu is being vetted. He is Minister-Designate for Railways Development. Key issues talked about so far: Dumso railway development. What are his plans? SAL representation and a lot of energy contracts because of his previous position. Let's take you back to Parliament right now.
Buy into the 65% that you talk about the generation. It's also to renegotiate some of the capacity charges, because generation of 65% is extremely high. So these two things that we have done, the renegotiation of the capacity charges and injecting more newer and brighter equipment into the distribution end, helps us to address the system as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What percentage decrease in tariff should consumers expect by the time you complete these two exercises?
It will reflect definitely on the consumer tariff. Mr. Chairman, it's also on record to note that the tariff that consumers enjoy today here, it's still less than the tariff they consumed in about 5-6 years back. So the further reductions or making sure that these costs are taken out, of course, is going to reduce the tariffs further. As I've stated, for instance, migrating of car power from heavy fuel to gas, for instance, alone, was the major cause of just an increment of 7% in tariff that we witnessed in 2020. Tariffs were going to go up as high as 35% according to the PRC prediction. But because of that movement alone, that reductions, of course, comes down to benefit the consumers. I would expect not less than 10 to 15% if we are able to address the system, to see some benefits in terms of the tariff. The tariff system as it exists now needs to be very flexible in terms of the adjustment. The automatic price adjustment formula has not often been triggered, and what happened is the accumulation of that ending up raising the tariff anytime PLC would want to increase it. So frequent adjustments in terms of triggering the automatic adjustments, it's also very important, so that at any particular point in time, we should know where we are. Especially as you see today, prices of petroleum products are currently climbing because we are getting gradually out of the COVID relief. So we should be seeing some little incremental increase in some of these products as we move forward.
In 2017, the per capita access to electricity from the Africa Development Bank studies in Ghana was 79%. Per capita access to electricity in Ghana, and it was the highest in the entire sub-region after Cape Verde. And you can understand Cape Verde is a very small country, and they use a lot of renewable energy sources. 2020, what is the per capita access to electricity now? What's your data? And add that to Keta exploration as Salton, what's happened to those two exploration activities?
Your first question was I didn't get one clear.
The first point was the per capita access to electricity in Ghana today. 2017 it was 79% per capita access to electricity. Yeah. The next highest country in West Africa was Cape Verde, which had 92% per capita access to electricity. Mm. So I'm asking you, at the time you were leaving office, what was the per capita access to electricity in Ghana? And then take on board a question on Keta exploration, which I know started. What's the status of the Keta exploration?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The access rate at time I was leaving office at about 85%. Which is of course one of the highest within the region. I mean, coming very close after South Africa. Ghana has done very well in terms of its penetration of access to electricity. With the Keta exploration, it's about 85%, 84.7%. Getting to about 85%. Yeah. But the policy of government was to move it up to 90%. And this House will recollect the number of turnkey projects that we brought into the House. It is expected that when the construction began in most of those communities, the access rate will be moved to quite close to 90%. The delay in commencement of those projects, I think it's something that everybody knows. Because of the COVID, we have delayed the implementation of those projects. But I'm sure that as we get out of the COVID, most of those contractors will return back to site to speed up the construction, and this will increase the access rate. The Keta exploration project, temporarily it's at halt. Again, basically because of the injection of capital from the IOCs. But what government has done is to intensify the online exploration, which extended up to the north. GMPC has done quite a very intensive work. The 2Ds have been completed, the areas have been closed up for further 3D exercise. The GMPC report proves that the areas are looking very, very good. And so we have increased activities in terms of exploration on the onshore. But we have minimized activities on the offshore in terms of the Keta Basin itself.
And last question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you have had three.
No, this is my last question.
You have had three.
Pardon?
You have had three already. In fact,
no,
more than three.
Just ask one and then a baby. Carry on.
I'll take a last one.
That has to do with small-scale mining. The nominee who just left before you came tried to defend government record in terms of fighting Galamsey. You were there. The general perception out there is that you performed abysmally in fighting Galamsey. There was a temporary halt, you seized equipment and etc. But as we speak today, I mean, there's a lot of Galamsey activity going on across the country. Can you explain really what is the problem of Galamsey, and with the benefit of hindsight, now that you are leaving the ministry, what would you recommend should be done differently? Take into consideration the activities of Minerals Commission, the role of district assemblies, the role of chiefs, the role of security agencies on the grounds, and all the citizens. What do you think should be done differently?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The issue of Galamsey in Ghana is not quite different from what we see even in the mature provinces. When the gold rush, for instance, happened in the United States of America, I think it was more than what we see currently in Ghana. But it takes them time as a country, to build consensus and go forward to address the problem. The Galamsey problem we have in Ghana has to do more with attitude and also our behavior towards our environment. Yes, of course, this government came in with an approach to address the Galamsey problem because largely we believe that the use of the force might not necessarily be the way to address it. But as human as we are, some force would have to be introduced. So I wouldn't say that the government has failed in its attempt to address the Galamsey problem. The problem of Galamsey is an ongoing, and solution to address it must also be an ongoing. It cannot be an event. When I was a sector minister, I think we put in a lot of measures, and those measures again find its way into the interministerial committee, of environment that we try to resolve. There were some excesses, of course, in a human environment. You must expect that. But I think that my advice for the new minister is to relook at some of the regulations. I quite remember we came out with a multilateral mining integrated approach document, which had fortunately not been implemented. I would advise the new sector minister to look into that because the World Bank was prepared to buy into that. The Australian government was prepared to buy into that. Unfortunately, we couldn't launch that document as at the time I left that ministry. So my advice to the incoming minister maybe to advise him to go back and look into the multilateral mining integrated project document, which I think will be a way forward to address the Galamsey menace we have in the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, congratulations for your new position. Sometime last year, somewhere around the end of September, the President was in Kumasi, specifically in my constituency, to commission a 51-kilometer long standard gauge railway line to connect Eduardin and Ashanti region. At the commissioning, I learned that the current railway development plan envisaged a complete movement away from the narrow gauge to the standard gauge. What, in your view, will be for this new policy approach to the sector, if you can enlighten us on that? Thank you.
Chairman, the new master plan, as she rightly put it, deviate from the narrow gauge to the standard gauge. There are advantages, in both ends. But the major reason why the country is moving to the standard gauge is the fact that the narrow gauge hardly has currently been undertaken by any new emerging countries, except even within our sub-region here in Africa. It's only South Africa that it seems to be using the narrow gauge. The narrow gauge, what it does is that it enables the train to be able to, meander through smaller communities. And by doing so, it travels at a lower speed because its ability to meander through narrow communities. The introduction of standard gauge, what it means is that the speed is going to be very high, in the sense that the stability in terms of what it sits on the base would also increase because of this axial load. So the standard gauge is going to increase in speed and also increase the axial load. Currently, the speed, according to the master plan, is going to move from about 120 kilometers per hour to about 160 kilometers per hour. What the standard gauge might not do is that there is a possibility that it may not be able to go through some of the communities because the curvature in terms of the standard gauge is not as easier as if you use the narrow gauge. With the narrow gauge, because of the speed, the train will be able to move slowly and meander. With the standard gauge, it may go at a very tall speed and may not be able to meander. But what we can do again with the standard gauge approach is that we may need to acquire more right-of-way. If more right-of-way is acquired, in addition to the existing right-of-way we have, then it can take time through the design to go through those communities. So this is the reason why I think that the framers of the master plan, of course, which I think is yet to come to cabinet for approval, thought of migrating away from the narrow gauge to the standard gauge, just basically because of spare parts and other details. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. My last question. What are some of the major challenges that you envisage as a railway minister, and what measures will you introduce to minimize these challenges if approved by the committee? Thank you.
Did I get you clear? Challenges in the railway sector, you mean? Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are several challenges currently within the sector, as the House will agree with me. One of them, which is very important and key, is how to address issues of right-of-way, which has to do with the acquisition of land. That, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned earlier that we would have to henceforth begin to include the cost of right-of-way in our unit pricing, and so that we do not look at right-of-way as a separate item from the construction project, where government will have to pay for right-of-way, and contractors or IPC contractors will have to come on and also do the construction. We need to build them together so that that issue can be addressed. Another major problem we need to look into the sector again is the key personnel that are in the sector. You will agree with me that this is a new sector, it's a new ministry, and they lack personnel to work with. And so one of the things I'm going to do quickly is to talk to my colleague, the road minister, because, Mr. Chairman, there's no difference between the construction of railway line and road line. It is the same thing. There is no difference. Formation, surveys, it is the same. The way the road is constructed, that is what the same process they use for the railway line. So I will be speaking to my colleague, the road minister, to see if they can give me some of the technical persons from the Ministry of Roads or Highways to support my ministry to address some of the staff challenges that we have. Because the staff challenges is very important, and if we are able to address that, then we will begin to move forward in the right direction. Another major challenge is how do we begin to introduce local, contractors into the rail industry. As I've stated earlier, construction of the railway is not different from the roads. So some of these are road contractors, can be upgraded to come into the railway sector and construct the railway line for us. And that will make it cheaper, because today, as I speak, the cost of a railway, a kilometer, is about $6 million to $7 million, depending on the terrain. If you bring in some of these local contractors that, of course, have done several roads through difficult terrain, they should be able to address the problem. Going forward, I think that the railway industry, together with the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, will have to be talking to each other to see how both ministries can work very quickly. Ghana has a lot of deposits in terms of iron ore. His Excellency, the President's agenda is to see how we mineralize these resources to the benefit of the country. One of the cost-sensitive items in the railway industry has to do with the rail lines. Apart from the railway line, Mr. Chairman, 70 to 80% of all the other materials are local materials, right down from the base, the sub base, the ballast, and all the other things. They are all local materials. The only other material that comes in is the steel. So if as a country we are able to aggressively undertake our steel development project together with the deposit that we have, with the iron ore, we should be able to construct most of our railways line within the shortest possible time. These are some of the challenges that I think we can address as a country and move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Some quick preliminaries. I noticed from the
Honorable, we have spent so much time.
The statement.
Straight. Ignore the preliminaries and move straight to
No, for our record, Mr. Chairman, this is very important.
Our record is ours. So just go straight to the question for me, please.
Okay, I would address that in conclave because it's important. The communication from the President and his CV, the inconsistency, but I'll address that in conclave. Mr. Chairman, my first question will take me to the nominee's former role as Minister responsible for energy. On the 19th of October 2019, the Millennium Challenge Corporation terminated the PDS agreement. Ghana lost a whopping $190 million. You had said earlier, on August 15, 2019, that you discovered fraud in the whole PDS agreement. Considering that Ghana has managed this compact right from the days of President Kufuor, President Mills, President Mahama successfully, will you say that there was some dereliction on your part, some lack of due diligence, which led to Ghana incurring this loss, which continues to reverberate in international corridors?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, of course, it's on record that the government of Ghana terminated the relationship between the Power Distribution Service Company, PDS, and the ACG. The termination, Mr. Chairman, was triggered as a result of occurrence of certain material evidences that need to have been provided, that in view of government that were not provided. Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that a due diligence process in any construction activity is not an event. It's always an ongoing activity. The relationship between ECG and PDS under the arrangement was that there were certain conditions that we call condition precedents that were supposed to occur before the transfer of assets that we all witnessed in March. It came out clear that one of the critical items which has to do with the security of the assets, that the source of that security of assets was not genuine, was not valid, and it was described by even the same agency that was presupposed to have issued the security as fraud. On that basis, ECG and government thought that leaving an asset value of about $3 billion to a hand of a PDS, where security of those assets cannot be guaranteed, will not be good in management of our national assets as a country. Don't forget, these assets are for government and being managed on behalf of government by ECG. And so in event of default, if ECG cannot go back and get its $3 billion asset because the basis of covering that asset is found not to be valid, then of course the only thing that will be left to government is to go out of the marriage relationship. And I think this is exactly what government does. Now, the school of thought is that government has lost an amount of about $100 million as a result of the terminations of the marriage relationship between the two parties. Well, this $100 million is the money coming from the United States of America, the MCC Compact. But do we look at the opportunity cost? Are we looking at the $100 million as an independent, irrespective of what would have happened? Do we want to say that, yes, let's go for the $100 million, but in case of default, we cannot call on the payment security, which is about $3 billion, which is higher? Obviously, any rational country will look at its asset ownership in terms of the value. So to me, the $3 billion, of course, far in excess of the $100 million that we're losing, because in case of default, we may not be able to call on our asset value of about $3 billion. So in my view, that contract, of course, as you rightly put it, yes, I did describe it as fraudulent, because from the source of where we're supposed to get the guarantee, they themselves described it as fraudulent, because number one, they stated that they are not in capacity to issue such a high level of guarantee. The person who issued the guarantee don't have the capacity to issue that guarantee. And number three, and that for such a guarantee to be issued, it needs to go through their national system. And all these things have not been done. When we went on the verification exercises, it was on that basis that I described, the deal as fraudulent. And I don't think Ghana government, in the long run, have lost anything from that deal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, just a follow Honorable Ablakwa, for a minute, excuse me. Did you formally communicate any concern on the guarantees to PDS? And are you aware that PDS is in court making some claims? So other than the figure that the Honorable Ablakwa have shared with you, there were losses from the United States of America, the Millennium Challenge Authority, and then MIDA. Those losses is what he has referred to. A judgment that occasioning out of it will constitute some loss to the Republic. What do you have to say to this? Thank you, Chair.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that will be predetermined. I would, Mr. Chairman, with all respect, because the case is within the court, I wouldn't say there will be any need for a judgment there. Any aggrieved party has a right to seek judicial, address when it finds itself in a very difficult commercial position. PDS has found itself in this commercial position, and they have every right to go to court. But I think government of Ghana is right. The advice from Attorney General's office is right. The ECG has put in every indication that they've undergone this due diligence process, and we have every fact and details which trigger the termination of that contract. So I think that there will not be any a judgment in the future. Though they are in court, I don't.
Chairman, my other question, did you write to PDS to draw their attention to the fact that there were problems with the guarantees that they issued?
Yes, of course, ECG drew the attention of PDS, PDS, you asked me.
Chairman, we would appreciate any correspondence on the subject, whether from ECG or from you as Minister, any official communication to PDS, drawing their attention to those concerns you had with the guarantee. We appreciate you making it available to the Chairman through the clerk. Thank you. Honorable Ablakwa.
Sorry, Chairman, my question is a specific one. Do you take responsibility or not? Were you derelict?
Come again, Mr. Chairman, please.
Do you take responsibility for the whole PDS debacle, the whole caboodle? You were the sector minister. Do you take responsibility?
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman, sector minister at the time of which the terminations happened, must be responsible for assets and liabilities. So yes, of course, I take responsibility, and I know the termination was done at good cause and for convenience of Mother Ghana.
Honorable, was it your personal decision as a minister or a cabinet decision you implemented? Was it your personal decision as a minister or a cabinet decision you implemented?
Mr. President, this is a cabinet decision that we implemented. It was not my unilateral decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The decision for termination was a cabinet decision.